Thank you for that kind introduction. Whenever I hear about the various things that have happened in my life, I always feel a little bit like Forrest Gump. Okay? So, how do all those things fit together? That's really confusing to me because that's not the usual trajectory or path that one has in life. And I feel, in many ways, that maybe that's a good place to start. Because I'd like to introduce you to the Institute for Advanced Technology and Public Policy first, and then one of our key projects, which is digital democracy, second. But to do that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the experiences I had, which informed me that we need a different way of engaging politically. Now, you heard the narrative about my background as a, well, you didn't hear I used to be a framer and a carpenter, and I built many of those apartments that are right across Los Osos Valley Road and built log cabins in Wyoming. So in the earliest time of my life, I actually earned an honest living. That was a long time ago. Later pursued academia and loved the analysis of what's going on beneath our feet. I have yet to see the movie San Andreas, but I was feeling myself, I'm going to have to. And then finding myself working for Exelon, leading a number of projects and becoming a strategic planner, developing technology around the world for Exelon from their research labs. All those things ultimately informed me that the way to really try and make a difference was I needed to get into politics. And that meant I had to move to California to run for office, which was a rather daunting enterprise. We were sitting there in Houston, Texas. What does that even look like? But I really felt that the world was kind of heading in the wrong direction, and we needed to roll up our sleeves and try and make a difference. And so when I ran for the legislature, I, like almost all my colleagues, showed up bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, optimistic, enthusiastic, convinced that all would be well. That we could fix these things if we all just banded together, rolled up our sleeves, and collegially solve problems. Of course, what I found, being a brand new freshman assemblyman, is they give you the tiniest little office in the most remote part of the Capitol. They assign you the most insignificant committees that deliberate on the most obscure issues, and you find yourself at the end of a year or two asking yourself, have I made a difference yet? And you have to kind of look and you wrestle with that. You engaged on Diablo and tried to make a difference. You engaged in some challenges in Los Osos locally and tried to make a difference. Maybe a task at Aero State Hospital and make a difference. But the big issues in the state really eclipse those local issues. And so I began saying, well, what I need to do is get involved in leadership. Have any of you seen the movie or the TV series House of Cards?
Yes.
You know what this getting involved in leadership thing means? Okay, not exactly like in House of Cards. It's not, well, it's close, but not quite like House of Cards. But there is a really intense process whereby one navigates through those political waters inside one's own caucus to take on increased responsibilities. And so in that season of my life, that became very important to me because it seemed to me that I came here to make a difference. And if being a backbencher and simply voting aye or nay does not make that difference, and the people who in fact have the power to make a difference are sitting in those more elevated positions, then what am I doing sitting back here? I need to go get them. And made that a goal, and in the course of some hard work, ultimately became the minority leader of the California State Assembly, filling the position that Kevin McCarthy had left when he went to Congress. And at that moment, I found myself what's known as one of the Big Five. The Big Five is the governor, and the Republican and Democrat leader of the Senate, the Republican Democrat leader of the Assembly. And I held one of those jobs, and I said, surely now I can make a difference. In this terribly dysfunctional system, now we can right this ship of state. And what I found, yet again, was this incredible intractability for changing the course due to the fact that even though you do have that opportunity now to vote on the biggest issues in the state, whether it's water or the budget or how to fund education or conservation, although you now have a much more capable role in these things, the really big transformational changes that fix the state, guess what? Those opportunities to affect those changes rarely come before the body, because almost every vote in Sacramento is highly tactical. In fact, what I would find over and over again, and of course, when you're a legislator, you take hundreds of meetings, as you should, is that time and time and time again, people would step forward with definitions of what the problem was. But very rarely did people step forward with definitions of what the solution was. And in fact, in that hectic world in Sacramento, and I would say probably Washington as well, well in excess of 90% of one's time is spent in those activities of showing up to committee, of making phone calls to raise money, of meeting with constituents, of doing research on the individual bills to make sure you're well informed to vote. But the really hard deliberations, how do you fix the big problems? They almost never occur. And when I share that with people, they're shocked. I think they assume that when you're up there are these incredibly enlightening conversations where people are sitting around the table, whiteboarding solutions to, how do we lower dropout rates in high school? How do we improve reading rates, by third grade? How do we build infrastructure in an affordable way? How do we put people back to work so that we're competitive globally? But you'd be surprised that almost never happens. And so, in that next cycle, I ran for Senate. Jerry Brown was running for governor. He was elected, and the next day he called me. And Jerry Brown said, I hear you're the guy who does deals in Sacramento. I want to talk to you. Will you come up and meet with me? And so this is the day after he got elected, and I, yes, Mr. Governor, I'd be happy to reporting for duty, and drove up to his offices. He was the Attorney General at the time, and not yet sworn in. And I went in thinking there'd be sort of a slap on the back. Nice to meet you. Tell me about your kids. What's your district like? And what impressed me about the governor is, in fact, he sat down with me for 2 solid hours, alone, saying, how do we fix the state? I know I'm going to need to work with Republicans, and I know that you have a relationship with Republicans, and maybe we can do this. And we sat down and debated and deliberated and struggled to try and find answers. And ultimately, what we discovered, again, was that there's these incredible forces that operate external to the legislature. And I think Jerry Brown would probably say the very same thing. And that if you are a follower of game theory, which is that certain behaviors are governed by the rules of the game, what you find is that no matter how good a legislator or governor or representative you send to Washington or Sacramento, when you're dealing with a system where the rules of the game are rigged, you consistently find that people that you send change, and they don't quite seem to be the person you sent, and they aren't doing the things you want them to do. And so when I reached this point where the new lines were drawn, which happened in 2012, and I discovered that I woke up in a district that was probably not winnable, rather than run for re-election, what I said to myself is, what can I do to try and make a difference? I have the benefit of all this background and knowledge of how the system is broken. Simply running for office to be one more person in that list of who's in the roster of the state senate may not be the right thing to do. And so what I elected to do instead was to not run for re-election and to try and set up a different kind of think tank. A think tank that tried to be the source of those ideas that are so necessary for legislators to act on. And in the absence of good ideas, what you will see is a lot of activity voting on ideas that don't really make a difference. And so when I thought about this concept of how do you create this sort of 21st century think tank that really is not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's not right, it's not left, it's not partisan, it's not trying to tactically kind of move the checkerboard, pieces around the checkerboard, but it's really strategically engaging. I looked around at what's happening globally. And as I think you know, remarkably, we're seeing some of the most rapid declines in poverty levels, in hunger levels, in infant mortality levels. Around the world, we're seeing tremendous progress that's occurring. And the obvious question is it because of a new government program or a particularly insightful United Nations or some other governmental body? And the answer is no. In fact, what we're seeing is this very dynamic world which is being transformed, and its economy is being transformed through the proliferation and progression of these technologies that are empowering people in ways we never imagined before. And of course, the private sector uptakes technology very rapidly. Why? Because if they don't, they're going to be out of business the next day. In fact, if you own a taxi service or you happen to have a fleet of phone booths out there, you probably know a lot about the challenges of not adapting to technology quickly enough. And so as the private sector rapidly embraces technology, what we saw was that government is a very late adopter of technology. Very slow to embrace how to do things in a new and innovative way using technology. And so we decided to set up a think tank that looks at how advanced technology can be used to really jumpstart public policy so that we can do what we do better, more efficiently, more rapidly, and more responsively to the public. Now that is easy to articulate, having never started a think tank. It was a really open question as to how one would do that. What I ended up doing was traveling around the country. I went to different think tanks on the East Coast, looked at different models, and what I arrived at was there's a new type of think tank that can be created. Not one that simply writes white papers or goes around to symposia giving speeches or sitting down doing obscure research, but a think tank that actually does things, that launches pilot projects, that writes software, that creates demonstrations of how particular new ideas would solve intractable and thorny problems. Once we adopted that approach, the question was, where can you go to find the caliber of intellects and the energy to work on these problems? And again, most think tanks are 501c3s and 501c4s and 501c6s. But what we looked at was the untapped potential sitting in the California State University system. In general, all 23 campuses, but at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in particular. Now, many of you know Cal Poly has a sterling reputation as a polytechnic, one of only two in the state that has top-flight engineers and mathematicians and physicists. What you may not know is that they are respected nationwide. They graduate upwards of 1,000 engineers per year. They are heavily recruited by Silicon Valley. And unlike Berkeley or Stanford or Scripps or Davis, they have this can-do, hands-on, learn-by-doing ethic, which says we do want to build stuff. And so when we looked at where we would put this think tank, it seemed exactly right to us. Rather than looking for an ivory tower that wants to write a paper that 20 other people in their profession can understand in an elite journal, why not go to the place where they roll their sleeves and actually build things? So we did that. We approached Jeff Armstrong, we approached the university, we approached the academic senate, we went through the process of establishing this institute, and then we reached out to partners who would be willing to serve on our board. And we were very fortunate to have people like Secretary of State George Shultz, who you remember from the Reagan administration, is on our board. Gavin Newsom, our Lieutenant Governor, serves on our board. Charles Munger, who is in fact the driving force behind all the redistricting reform, which you're keenly aware of, including the top two primary. And a number of other people joined our board. And then we began asking the question, what will our projects be? Because we have this vision, but your vision is only as good as your execution, which means you need to identify where will you begin to work. So we picked three broad areas. One is in renewable energy. I'll tell you more about that later if we have time in the Q&A, but I know I'm on a short clock. The second is how to close the achievement gap for Spanish language children in California, again using technology. a whale problem. If you solve it, it scales immediately across the country. There are a number of border states that have exactly the same challenges we have. We've created a really innovative way to tackle that. But the third, and what I want to talk about briefly today in my remaining time, is how do you address the issue of civic engagement? How do you get people involved in their government? Now, I am of the opinion that in the breast of every human, that flame flickers of wanting liberty and freedom and fulfillment in life. And they want to matter. And if you look at the arc of history, and you see the ideas that have come forth in this great nation, they have caught fire around the globe. In fact, virtually every place you look, when opportunities for human rights and freedom have been presented, the people embrace them. But that fire has not taken hold everywhere, has it? We look at what happened with the Arab Spring, where we had such amazing high hope. And we saw people stepping forward saying they didn't want to live the way they had lived before. But ultimately, those institutions that are necessary to support a pluralistic society were not strong enough. Which is why the League of Women Voters is an example of what is so important. Now, this problem of civic engagement and having people support their institutions, whether they be higher education, or whether they be labor unions, or whether they be trade associations, or whether they be service clubs, this sort of fabric that holds the people together is so critically important. But what we find is that it doesn't happen by default. You know, you look back at Greek history, you look at Athens, you look at that nation state when they stood up democracy as a form of government. Did you know, of course you do know that all citizens could vote. Did you know that not all of them wanted to? And did you know that civic engagement was a challenge for Athenians? It was, and in fact, one of the ways that they established to try and get people to show up to vote was the slaves would take a big cord and a big rope, and they would dye it red. And they, in a big concentric circle around the city, would begin walking toward the central square where everyone was supposed to gather so they could hear speeches and vote 10 times a year. Of course, they had a decennial calendar, so every month for them, they would gather. And as the slaves came with the rope, if the rope touched you and you had a red stain on you, you would be fined. And so the populace would scurry to the center, the city square, so they would vote. Later, that process was modified so that the first 6,000 citizens who arrived were given an award. They were actually given a payment if they would show up to participate. And finally, they used both techniques. So they had a kind of reward system and a punishment system. But this challenge of civic engagement and getting people involved is not new to us. It's been around for a very, very long time. And we don't have exactly the tools that I just described here, but we do have different sorts of tools. And when we looked at what's one of the key issues that prevents people from being involved, there's a lack of knowledge of what's going on in Sacramento and an inability to engage. Now, why is it so hard to know what's going on in Sacramento? Well, did you know that every 2 years, 5,000 bills are submitted? 5,000 bills are submitted every 2 years. Each bill has to go through multiple committees in each house, then go back to the House of Origin for another round of votes, and then back to the governor's desk. And that in these committees, there are no minutes. There's no transcript. There's no record of who said what. So if you want to know what's going on with the bill, what do? You drive up to Sacramento, you try and figure out when a particular bill is going to be heard. It might be heard 5 or 6 times before it gets to the governor's desk. You may show up one time. You wander through the building. Room 412 is on the 6th floor, of course. It's a labyrinthine environment where you try and find your way to the committee and find yourself in the room. And then you sit there sometimes for 4 hours for your one bill to be heard. And when it comes time for your testimony, There isn't really time for anything other than a yes or no. And we have 5,000 bills like that going through this, through every 2 years. And so we asked the question, how do you open up that process so that people can see what's actually happening on any particular bill, with any particular legislator, on any particular issue? How do you use technology to open that up? And it turns out that although there are no minutes, and I will tell you how many times I sat in that body, that look out, and these incredibly important bills were being deliberated, and the room was filled with lobbyists in their Armani suits and not a single member of the public. Can't tell you how common that was. Or how in Civic committee, and the legislators would feel like a good old boys club. They'd be laughing, there'd be ribald humor, an utter lack of professionalism, because no one was watching. And we asked, how can we open this up so people can see what's really going on? Well, it turns out that although there are no minutes and there are no transcripts, and no one knows who shows up, they do run a video feed inside of each one of these committee hearings. And so we began asking the question, could we create a software tool that converted a video into a transcript, speech to text, and then tag everyone who spoke so that you would know who said what, put it in an enormous database so that you could sit down at home and with a Google-like search, just click through and find what anyone said anytime you want. Be able to look at the backgrounds of legislators, look at the backgrounds of lobbyists, look at the money, where it came from, look at who hired the lobbyists. What if you could create a tool that virtually allows you to go from any place in the state and be in the Capitol? So that was our idea. And when we presented it to a number of big foundations, they said that's impossible. It just can't happen. And you look at government, and when government tries to build software, it's $20, $25, $30 million, it's 4 years later, and then it doesn't work. And so when we said, we're going to do it, we got a lot of raised eyebrows. Oh, this one individual heard about us from Houston, Texas. He sent his representative out, he met with us for a day, and gave us $1.2 million to try. So, for the last 7-8 months, I've had the good fortune of 4 very accomplished faculty at Cal Poly and 62 students working on this. And less than a month ago, 1 month ago, May 6th, we launched the beta version of this tool, which we're not even through the 1-year cycle yet. And we launched it because we wanted to show how this concept could potentially work, but also to get feedback so we keep improving the tool throughout the 1-year term that we were doing this. So what I'll do right now is show you just a quick video of kind of what the tool is attempting to do. And then because I think I'm close to my time, I'll go with Q&A. Okay, thank you.
We get asked a lot, why do we believe that digital democracy will make a difference? The answer in part is due to the fact that this tool is being built by a team of individuals who collectively have more than 50 years of experience in the state legislature. That includes a state legislator, a chief of staff, a Capitol director, a district director, and a team of advisors, all of whom started with this fundamental question. What tool in the hands of the citizenry would have gotten our attention?
Each of us has seen firsthand how hard it is to find information about what's happening in state government. It's difficult for people outside the system to punch through and get the attention of lawmakers and staff. And so we've channeled that experience to build something that will not only help people quickly discover relevant information, but then use that information in an effective and high-impact way.
Digital democracy makes it fast and easy for anyone to search, view, and share those video clips of moments that matter to them. The information on the site is laid out to allow users to quickly navigate content. The information can be discovered by committee hearing, bill, speaker, or a simple keyword search. From the home page, you can type a search term of interest. and the site instantly returns every time those terms were spoken in a committee hearing. You can see the name of the speaker, the hearing location and date, the brief context in which the terms were used. When you find the clip you want to watch, you simply click on the video play button. The video jumps right to your search results. A scrolling transcript allows you to follow along with the video. You can scroll up or down in the transcript, and if you find something new you want to watch, clicking on that section of the transcript will automatically advance the video to that moment. If you want to learn more about the speaker, you can click on the name and it will take you to that speaker's profile page. Each legislator's page will include information about recent testimony, committees on which they sit, and bills that they have authored. Information about campaign contributions and gifts to lawmakers is displayed on their profile page. To look at the profiles of other speakers, you can click on the Speakers tab at the top of the screen. Here, you can search by legislators, lobbyists, or others who provide testimony in hearings. A lobbyist speaker profile displays their employer and their list of clients, as well as links to videos of their testimony. Many advocates will want to quickly scan the hearings that are happening on a given week. Clicking on the Hearings tab at the top of the screen will display the most recent committees that have met, list the bills that were heard that day in committee, and list those who spoke on each of the bills. Clicking on a speaker's name will take you right to the beginning of that individual's statements about that bill in that committee. Or perhaps you're following a specific bill. Clicking on the Bills tab at the top of the screen allows you to put in the bill number, bill author, or bill topic of interest. Click on the bill number and you get detailed information about the bill, including a summary, the full text, history, analyses, and votes. The videos of each hearing in which this bill was discussed are displayed on the right side of the screen. Clicking the thumbnail brings you back to that specific bill video.
The most effective advocates were often those who were following the discussion and then afterward could fill in the gaps, respond to questions or concerns that were raised, or correct the record if they felt that something had been misrepresented. This type of engagement can strongly influence the views and votes of a legislator.
As a former legislator, I can tell you that the one person who's more influential than a well-connected lobbyist is a well-informed journalist. A well-informed journalist can connect the dots between what a legislator says and how a legislator votes, and then broadcast that information to a very wide audience. That's what holds elected officials accountable. So we've made sure that every moment in these videos is shareable through social and new media. Once you've identified the specific moment that you believe needs the public's attention, you simply highlight that moment, click on the share button, type in your comments, and broadcast that clip to mobilize, energize, and activate your networks to take action. Information is power, and this tool is designed to empower you.
Are you getting not positive feedback from legislators?
Yeah, so the legislators and lobbyists are a little anxious. The press is wildly enthusiastic. They're thrilled. The press corps has been shrinking year after year. We're adding a Google Alert type feature so that a member of the press, say your local Tribune, paper of record, has a political journalist, they can put in Hacho, Bill Monning, Diablo, water, whatever issues they want, and the tool is going to automatically alert them when anything hits their search criteria, so they can write on it immediately. So instead of having to be in Sacramento, you essentially have a tool that will be feeding information to scores of journalists around the state.
Two questions. One is it designed generically enough that other feeds can be brought into it? And secondly, will it be available as an open source software?
Yeah, so it is available as open source. We are still working through the licensing agreements that will allow people to access it as open source.
which obviously is not trivial, as I can tell you know by the way you asked the question. But yes, this is not a commercial enterprise, and it is available to the public. Yes?
Sam, I was just thinking too that another good place to introduce this tool would be to your government teachers on campuses.
That's a great idea. Well, I can't tell you how many times I would give talks to groups. I would describe the 10 best and the 10 worst bills of the year, and people would be like, "So how do I follow it? How do I get involved? How do I know what's happening?" And the answer was, there is no way. There now is a way.
Have any other states shown an interest in doing this?
Not that I'm aware of. Our funder has expressed interest in maybe us taking the tool national. So we're going to explore that. This month we're written up in USA Today, Politico, and the Huffington Post. Strong editorials from the Sacramento Bee, the San Francisco Chronicle, 2 editorials from LA Times, Monterey Herald, and Ventura Star, all of which were just giving glowing reviews that this is exactly the direction people need to go. So we're hopeful that with that kind of tailwind, we'll get another round of funding to go national with it, or there might be other opportunities to go in different directions.
One more question, and then we'll have to take it.
What I want to know is how did you get the voice to text to work the way it seems to work and not misquote people, because I cannot get it to understand or nuts on my phone. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, so that was actually an area of pretty difficult research. We use a number of different transcription programs. Mavis has one that comes out of Microsoft Shop. There are a number of others that have different success rates. Ultimately, we used some of those and a system known as Mechanical Turk, which is a really interesting approach that essentially takes transcription problems, breaks them into a gazillion pieces, pushes them out on the web, and then pays people a few cents for every word they transcribe, and then pulls them back in. So it's a way of taking people who live in India and China and around the world to do your job for you. And then we have quality control on campus with our students that go through every single line. So a lot of innovation, and this is only one of our 3 projects. The other 2 are pretty cool too.
And you're 501c3?
We're part of the university now.
Oh, okay.
Yep.